Hey, good morning, guys. Shiva here.
Good morning, sir.
Yeah, good morning. Let's wait for a couple more minutes and then we'll start the session. It was delayed due to the link sharing and all. So let's wait for a couple more minutes for a few more folks and then we'll continue our session today. I'll be on mute meanwhile.
Okay, fine. So we have 25 folks, 25. We have only 21 folks who joined this session. Okay, so let's wait for those remaining people as well, and then we'll have the mock discussion. But meanwhile, today I'll start with the basic things of software testing life cycle, and then we'll continue with our interview point of view questions and how the phase is going to start and how the phase can wind up, how this software testing life cycle works in the real time, what will be the first phase that we are going to have, and how we need to deal with these kind of phases and all, we will see it now. Meanwhile, if you have any questions from the earlier session. Okay, a brief recap on the earlier session. Let me share my screen. Okay, we discussed about the testing terminology. Yeah, we discussed about the testing terminology like black box testing, white box testing, and gray box testing, how this black box testing works in the real time. So what activity we can call it as a black box testing, and what are the techniques that we are having in black box testing. We haven't discussed the in detail of techniques, but we listed down what are the techniques that are available in black box testing. And factors also, we discussed what are the factors that we can consider in order to perform black box testing, and in order to tell how this white box testing gets completed. And next one, we discussed about white box testing, so how this white box testing works in the real time, and who is going to perform white box testing, who is the responsible person to carry this white box testing, we discussed. Under this white box testing, the factors are something like unit testing, sorry, path or branch coverage, code coverage, conditional statement coverage, loop coverage, cyclomatic complexity. These are the things that we discussed in the earlier session. And unit testing, component testing, and module testing also we discussed. And gray box testing, it's a combination of white box and black box testing. That's how we discussed in the last session. And apart from that, we had a discussion on integration testing, which is a important thing that initially development team is going to perform, and later on whatever the testing activity will be performing on the integrated build only. So in the integration testing, we discussed about Big Bang approach, how the modules can be integrated by the development team. That integration of modules can be happened in multiple ways, out of which Big Bang approach is one of the way that modules can be integrated, and top-down approach, bottom-up approach, and then incremental approach. These are the different approaches that we have to integrate the modules and to test it. So meanwhile, we discussed about a point called stubborn driver, which is nothing but a temporary program which can be developed and used when submodule implementation is in progress, is called stub. When main module implementation is in progress, the temporary program is nothing but driver, so which drives the complete unit. That means, so these are the things that we discussed in the last session. Any questions in this area, any questions in this concept? Anyone? If no answer, I can consider it as no, you don't have any questions. I can move forward. Okay, fine then. So, and apart from that, we discussed about the list of interview questions we listed down. So whatever the interview questions that we are going to have, so based on the concepts that we have revised till now, so we discussed all these interview questions, and we need to work on the mock session of all these interview point of view questions. So we will discuss about those things once all the team members are available. Now today, we'll start with software testing life cycle. So how this testing life cycle works, and what are all the phases that we have in software testing life cycle, and how each phase is going to work in the real time. Let's see.
life cycle.
So what are the phases in software testing life cycle? Anyone?
Requirement gathering.
It's not development life cycle, sorry. It's a testing life cycle.
Test installation.
What is that? Test?
Installation.
Okay. Test initialization. Next
Test planning. Test planning.
one. Okay. Next.
Test design.
Okay. Next.
Test execution. Test execution.
Test closer. Test closer.
If sir.
Yeah. Please tell me.
Sir.
Okay. So we have test initialization, test planning, test design, which include test scenario design and test case design, test execution, test reports, and test closure. Fine. These are the phases that we have in software testing life cycle. Each one is having its own priority. Each one is having its own priority. So what is this priority? What is this each phase that can be considered in a real time? So what is the priority? What is the importance that we have here? What can be done in test initialization phase? Fine. So test initialization phase can be also called as test initiation phase, where this is the initial step that can be taken care by the project management team or QA manager who is going to perform the basic analysis on the acceptance of the project. So here the test initialization phase, whatever the test initialization phase that we have mentioned here, this is being, the test initialization phase is being considered in order to analyze the basic kickstart of the testing phase. Before going to test the application, at least our manager has to think about how many resources are available, how this initialization can be done. Do we require any additional resources? Do we require any training? Do we require any technical support? So what kind of activity that we are going to perform? So do we really require any experts here, right? So all these kind of analysis is going to perform in the initialization phase. Who is going to perform? QA manager or test manager will take this activity in order to perform the initialization phase. Based on the initialization phase, next phases are going to get considered. So the next phases will be considered based on the initialization phase only. So let's list down what we have here. Resource planning, training requirements, support, requirements,
Time requirements.
technical trainings, estimations. Next,
Time requirements, sir.
that's what estimations I have given. Domain expertise. We cannot use like time requirements or time consumptions. Few terminologies directly here. There are some technical terms which are related to this. Those we need to use. Okay, so that's the reason I have mentioned it as estimations. Next, any? Yeah, I think these are the ones that we have. Okay. What is meant by resource planning? Okay. So resource planning is nothing but number of resources required or number of available resources in order to understand how many resources required for this project and how big this project is, what is the duration of this particular resources will be on the same project. So how many domain expertise are basically the resource planning is something like how many resources are available versus how many resources that are required to the project. So that's a resource planning. So we can, let's say there are 20 resources available for us in a company, but our project required only 10 resources. We cannot put all the 20 resources because they are completely free, right? So how many number of resources required, those many number of resources we need to keep. We cannot keep like these resources are available, we cannot go with all of them, and we cannot keep everyone in the project, and it becomes very tough to have the estimations and all these kind of things. So that's one of the main reason, resource planning is the first step that will be taken care while doing initialization phase. So in this initialization phase, what are the initial steps that has to be taken care? First point. Second point, how many resources are available? Let me list down here. Resources required versus resources available. This is the important phase to take decision on the resources which can work on the project. Who can work on the project. So this is the initial step taken care by the manager. And the training requirements. So based on the project, QA manager will come to know if any trainings are required or any kind of knowledge sharing sessions are required, how this is going to happen, so how this project can be delivered, and what are all the training required in order to improve the quality of the project. So process improvement trainings will be there. All this training requirement includes the activities performed by the resources. Process improvement trainings, project related trainings, project related trainings. Next one, support. What is meant by support? What is meant by support? Support requirements. Anyone? Anyone support?
Support from another team, sir. If you want.
Okay, considered. Any other exact inputs? Okay, basically from where we are going to get the support? Any idea? Okay, so basically we are going to get the support from the BA team or project management team or product owner team. Why? Because they are the one who are going to interact with the customer regularly, and they are the ones who are going to have all the documents to be maintained in order to understand the requirements or in order to explain the requirements to the development team. So that's one of the main reasons support team is nothing but they have to give their complete support to the project team to understand the requirement. Suppose my my understanding might be different and development team understanding might be different. We don't know like who is correct and who is wrong. So in that case, whenever we are working on an application or whenever we are trying to understand the requirement in the application, we might need some support from the if you want me to tell the exact team, BA team or product management team, product team, I can say. So we need support from the product team. So in that case, if support requirements are needed to the entire project team or to the resources, QA manager will take care of that support, and then they'll request them. QA manager will request them saying, we need your support while testing this project, and this is the initialization that we are going to take in care, and these are all the areas where we need support from your end. So based on their requirements, we are going to raise a support request to the respective product owner team. Technical trainings. What are the kind of what are all kind of technical trainings that required? So it includes like hardware kind of stuff. It includes like automation. It includes like project related configuration. So all these kind of technical support. It is not only like learning something new programmatically or something. So it's not only related to the programmatic part. Technical means here any kind of configuration, any kind of setup, any kind of hardware related component setup, any kind of um, programmatic kind of stuff, everything will be included under technical trainings. Even if those are required in order to write the project or in order to understand the project, technical trainings are also required. That will be taken care in the initialization phase only. Now the important one is estimations. If estimations gone wrong, the complete initialization phase will be the wrong one. So it will be a wrong step for us. So that's the reason estimations is having highest priority in this particular list. Why? Because if estimations are perfect, then the execution, the test execution or whatever the test life cycle that we are doing here, that will be the perfect thing. That will be the perfect one to the team. Why? Because these many resources are available. Instead of giving, let's say for 10 resources, we require 100 hours to test the application. But if QA manager has given 100 hours instead of 10, if QA manager has given 100 hours or 200 hours more than the required one, what will be the thing? The estimations will completely wrong as part of the analysis. So that's one of the main reason whenever we are talking about estimates, there are some certain formulas. There are certain formulas where QA manager will follow. So those formulas will help us in order to write the estimation techniques here. So that we may not require, but QA manager will take care of those kind of stuff. But just remember that estimations play a very important role in order to perform the resource planning and domain expertise. So even QA manager will think about, do we have any resources available in QA team who is having complete domain knowledge? Instead of getting the support from other teams or other resources requirement, QA manager will think about how many resources available in a team who is having knowledge on this particular domain, who are having this kind of domain expertise in our team. So even they'll think about in that point of view. If any person is available in that domain expertise, they'll take help of that domain expertise in order to test the application. And for this initialization phase, there is no specific template or there is no specific document that can be followed. Okay, that's the reason I haven't mentioned any specific kind of documentation name here. I hope you understand my point, what I'm saying. So it depends on the QA manager. They can follow through email process or email template, or they can create new template in order to initialize the testing phase. It depends on their requirement. It depends on the work that they are having. So based on their need, they are going to work on the documentation part. There is no specific template for initialization phase. If you have any questions, please let me know. Okay. I don't hear anyone's voice, so I can accept it as you don't have any questions. What is mean by test planning? Anyone?
Like preparing test scenarios and test cases to execute.
No, we have that for test design phase, no? I'm talking about planning.
In how many days testing want to finish? Depends upon task preparation and team management and allocation of team works.
Any other exact definition? We already discussed.
Yes. Sir, to prepare a dummy document.
No concept of dummy here.
What type of action to test the application?
Exactly. Telling it more in a more clear way, test planning is nothing but it's an activity where we can perform, where we can consider what type of testing activity that we are going to perform on this particular project will be included in test planning document. It's a planning activity where we are going to talk about what type of testing activity that we are going to perform, whether it is regression testing or retesting or unit testing, or what kind of testing that you are going to perform. That's an important thing when you're talking about test planning. It's not a like complicated thing that you can explain. Planning, the word itself is saying that you are going to plan something. What plan? What is the plan that you are going to perform here? So test planning is nothing but the document which talks about what type of testing activity the team is going to perform. What is the importance of test planning document? Who is going to prepare this document?
Test lead.
QA manager or test lead? Anyone can prepare. Okay, so what is the importance? What are the important things that we are going to include in this document? Anyone? What are the important things that we can include in this test planning document? Okay, fine. Let me tell you. Basically, this test planning document is nothing but who is going to, sorry, who is the responsible person? QA manager or test lead is the responsible person. Basically, this document is nothing but it's a dynamic document. A dynamic document. Whenever changes are required, we can update the document. So that's the reason we are calling it as a dynamic document. If you like, another important thing is test planning documents includes test strategy information as well. Test strategy. Earlier, we call it as static document, but when we include this in test planning document, we are calling this as a dynamic document. So earlier, this test strategy document, we can call it as a static document because the information what we have included in test strategy cannot be changed. But what is happening here nowadays, we are including this whatever the content that we have in test strategy, we are including this in test planning document only. So because of that reason, we are maintaining this as a dynamic document. That means whenever the change is required, we can change the information even in the test strategy information as well. There is no separate document. This particular section will be included in test planning document itself. So first we'll talk about this test strategy and then we'll go to test planning. So what are all the information that we are going to include in test strategy? Anyone, what is meant by strategy?
Logic for
Tricks.
What is that? Can you please repeat?
Tricks.
Tricks. I
Sir,
don't know.
logics.
No. Any other? Anyone else?
Plans.
Sorry?
Plans.
Doing in
Pl-
different manner.
Doing?
In a different manner.
Okay. No, doing it in different manner. No. Any other? Plans is also no, because we have test planning phase for that. Plans, we can at least we can consider that word, but still I want to know the exact term that we can use it for test strategy. Anyone? Okay, basically if you are assigning some task, you'll ask you can ask this question. So what is your strategy on working on this particular task? So that there, what is meant by strategy? No? Okay, fine. Strategy is nothing but it's an activity which can be performed in order to understand the implementation of this particular activity. Implementation of the activity assigned. So in order to implement the activity, what are all the things required for us? Resources, estimations, right? So the main two ingredients, the main two terms that we are going to have in test strategy document is not two, three we'll have: resources, tasks, and estimations. So main three ingredients that we are going to have in test strategy document is resources, task, and tasks, and estimations. So here in test strategy document, basically we are going to include how many resources are available for this project, how many resources are going to work on this project. Out of these many resources, who is test lead, who is senior, who is test engineer, and who is trainee, we are going to categorize that. And for those resources, what are the tasks that are being allocated for those resources? What are all the tasks that has been allocated for each resource and each task? What is the estimation? What are the hours that we have allocated? Let's say resource 1 assigned with one task, which is nothing but task 1, which is a very big one. So for that task, we have given estimations as 3 days. Within 3 days, this resource has to complete the testing activity of this particular task assigned. If not, we need to get the comments from that particular resource saying why it is taking more time than the estimated time. So here always we are depending on the estimation to analyze the performance of this particular resource. To understand the performance of this resource, always we will depend upon the estimations only. So in this particular context, test strategy always includes with the test planning document only. Whatever the test planning document that you are going to prepare nowadays, you are going to include this content as well. Okay, resource is nothing but number of resources available in the project. What are the tasks allocated? What are the action items that each and every resource has to perform? For that particular action item, what are the estimations? So how much time that you are going to allocate to that particular resource? Any questions in test strategy? Are we clear?
You repeat again, sir.
Okay. Test strategy document is nothing but the document which is used to include the implementation of the activities assigned to resources. So what kind of implementation? Like how you are going to implement this testing activity? What is your thought process on implementing this testing activity? In order to test the application, you need three terms. One is resources, second one is tasks, third one is estimations. Resources are nothing but how many number of members who is going to number of people working on this particular project, whether 10 QA resources are available or 12 resources are available, 5 resources are available, who are all available in this particular project. And second thing, what are the tasks that we are allocating to each and every resource? If it is a test lead, what is the task that we are going to allocate? If it is a senior test engineer, what are all the tasks that we are going to allocate? If it is test engineer, what are all the tasks allocated to that resources? If it is a trainee, what are all the tasks we have allocated to that resource? We are going to list down those things. Once we allocated the tasks, we are going to provide the estimations as well. Assigning the tasks is not easy. For this resource 1, allocate these tasks. It's not like that. We need to provide the estimations. So how much time it will take to test the application? How much time it will take to test this particular functionality? Let's say one resource will take 10 days to test the functionality. If 10 resources, how many days? There is a functionality which can be tested in 10 days. If we allocate only one resource to test that functionality for 10 days, what is going to happen? After 10 days, we are going to get the result. Suppose if we are going to allocate 10 resources, the functional testing will be completed within a day, right? So these kind of estimations we are going to provide in the test strategy document. Test strategy document. Understood?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So moving back to the point, test planning. So test planning is basically, it's a planning of how the application testing is going to happen. How the application testing is going to happen. There are few mandatory sections that we are going to include, mandatory terms that we need to include in the test planning document. What are those mandatory terms that we need to include? What are those important requisites that we need to include in the document? Let us list down those things and then we'll discuss each and every point one by one. Okay. I just need a couple of minutes. I'll be back in 2 minutes. Okay. Meanwhile, you can just go through. I'll scroll up. You can just go through whatever I have written here. I'll be back in a couple of minutes. Okay, I'm back. So let's talk about test planning now. So what is meant by test planning? So it's a kind of activity where we are going to decide what type of testing activities that we are going to perform in the project level. But it's not so simple thing to include all the definitions or all list down all the type of testing activities that we are going to have. But we need to understand how much impact that it is going to have on the application, how much impact that it is going to have at the project level. What is meant by impact that we are talking about? There are few things we need to include in the test planning document. So whenever we are creating a test planning document, there are few points that we must have to follow. So let me open one word document so that at least I'll try to show you what are all the things that we can. Okay, so 1 second. First page will always talk about the project name, and the version number, we need to include. And once this particular information has been included, and then we need to add index at the second page, and third page list of all activities team is working on. And fourth one, most important thing, there are few definitions that you have to include, out of which the one is in scope, second one is out scope, in scope, out scope, entry criteria, exit criteria, suspension, resumption, suspension, resumption. Here we have to include few more. List of all activities team is working on includes testing type names and its definitions. Example, I can say regression testing, retesting, system testing, optimal testing. Even though this optimal testing is under system testing only, we have to define each and everything separately. Browser compatibility testing, only compatibility testing, UI testing, performance testing, database testing, web service, all these activities, whatever you are going to perform at the project level, everything has to be included if you are going to work on that type only. In our project, regression testing is not required, then don't include this term. Okay, If regression testing is required in your project, include that. If not, don't include. So including the term is not only the activity, you have to define this, what is meant by regression testing with respect to your project. So whenever you are testing a project, based on your project analysis, you have to define the regression testing. You have to define the regression testing. Likewise, you have to define all the definitions, whatever you are having here. And coming to in scope, what is meant by in scope? Anyone? What is meant by in scope and out scope? What is meant by in scope and out scope? Anyone? No one? Fine. In scope is nothing but what are all the functionalities that are there in our scope to test at this point of time. Let's say our project started in the month of December. Okay, this is one of the example that you need to understand. Project development start date. Okay, I can mark it as October. Okay, project testing start date, I can mark it as December. This is just a rough example. Okay, so this project will be from 2022 till 2024. What is meant by in scope? Development, whatever the development activity that has been started in the month of October, and whatever the testing activity that has been started in the month of December. The application, you need to categorize or you need to list down what are all the functionality available in the project. You need to list down what are all the functionalities available in the project. Let's say out of 10 functionalities, I have only 5 which are ready to test. Out of 10, I have only 5 functionalities which are ready to test. That means whatever the functionality that is ready for this particular version, those comes under in scope activity, which are all having that possibility to test. So functionality which is having possibility to test is nothing but in scope. The functionality which is not having the possibility to test is nothing but out scope. It is out of scope. We cannot test it because the implementation is not been done, or else the documentation is not ready for the testing activity. In scope, whichever is available, whatever the documents are available, whatever the cases available, whatever the activities that are available, whatever the functionalities that are available, those comes under in scope activity. Wherever possibility that we are having to test the application, that possibility we can consider it as a in scope. Out of scope means we can't test it because the functionality itself is not ready. Likewise, we are going to define in scope and out scope. The functionality which are ready for testing, and out of scope. The functionality which are not ready for testing, So you have to analyze one thing here. Project, at the end of the project, not even single functionality will be out of scope. Everything will be under in scope only. Everything will be under in scope only. Why? Because the implementation can be done, right? By end of the project, everything can be implemented. Every functionality implementation can be completed, and everything is under in scope only for the testing activity. We need to test all the functionality, whatever we have included under in scope. But at the end of the project, all the functionalities will be under in scope only. Out of scope, zero functionality, because everything has been implemented. But in general, out of scope can be defined as the functionality which are not ready for testing. which are not ready for testing. What is mean by entry criteria and exit criteria? Anyone?
When to perform test activity.
Okay. Exit criteria?
It describes when to close the testing activity.
Okay. Entry criteria is nothing but when to start or when to perform that testing activity. Exit criteria is nothing but when to close the testing activity. These two definitions are correct, but on what basis we can define, or on what basis we can conclude the testing activity can be started and the testing activity can be stopped?
When build is stable.
Let me write it
And
here. When to start the testing activity, when to end the testing activity. Yeah, tell me.
when build is stable at test environment.
Okay, when the build is stable, enable in QA environment. Next,
And all the test cases and test scenarios should be prepared.
when all the test cases, and first we need to write scenarios always. When all the test scenarios and test cases are ready, next,
Test environment setup.
that's what first point, no?
Good.
And before going to start, we can check smoke test.
Before
After test should be completed. The smoke test indicate the build is stable or not, sir. So after the smoke test, then we can do other testing activities. So it should be 1 point.
okay, so can you please repeat the last point?
When we should know that when the build is stable or no, sir. So for that we can do smoke test.
No, that's a different story. Smoke testing is a different story. Entry criteria means what is your entry point. So until you said the build is stable, you cannot go for smoke testing activity, right?
I think before get the build stable, we can do.
Before get the build stable. No. Before build is stable in QA environment, it cannot be convincible, because even okay, smoke testing can be performed to check if the build is stable in QA environment. Can we consider this? Right? In this point, both can be covered. Smoke testing can be covered, and then we can confirm whether the build is stable in environment or not. Next, No
Testing
points?
environment provided.
Okay, entry criteria. Entry criteria is nothing but when to start the testing activity, and there are couple of factors which can be considered in order to start the testing activity. One is smoke testing should be performed in order to check if the build is stable in QA environment or not. Based on that, we can start working on the entry criteria. And second thing is when all the test scenarios and test cases are ready for the testing activity. So ready for
మా నాన్న లేపమ్మా మమ్మల్ని లేపుతారు కదా.
excuse me, can you please go on mute? When all the test scenarios and test cases are ready for the testing activity. So there are couple of cases, couple of comments that we can describe when to start the testing activity. This is just an entry point. We are not concluding whether these points, based on these points, we are completing the testing activities. No, we are just at the entry point only. So what is mean by smoke testing here?
Checking the build is stable or not.
Checking the build is stable or not. Now, what exact thing that we can do in smoke testing? Checking the build is stable or not. Okay, fine. That can be acceptable. But what exact thing that we are going to perform to check whether the build is stable or not?
The application should be deployed in testing environment
No.
and checking all
Checking all the
functionalities are working or not.
One small correction to your point. Application should be deployed in testing environment or staging environment or QA environment to check, and you said check all the functionalities whether the application is working or not. It's not all the functionalities. Smoke testing specifically, we will not concentrating on each and every functionality. In smoke testing, we will concentrate only on the major functionality of an application. You should tell this point, major functionality. Why? Because if you are going to test all the functionalities, that comes under system testing.
Yes, sir.
Right? Smoke testing is a job where you are going to test the major functionalities of an application to confirm whether that build can be acceptable or not. The initial portion of smoke testing is to accept for testing or not is the important point. That's the reason we are calling it as a build acceptance test. Smoke testing can also be called as a build acceptance test, right?
Yes, sir.
Build acceptance test is nothing but you are going to get the information whether that build can be accepted or not. When you are going to accept the build, if all the major functionalities are working in the smoke testing phase. If you are testing all the functionalities, then that comes under system testing. So entry criteria always talks about couple of points which are dealing with smoke testing to check whether the build is stable in QA environment or not. When it is stable, then we are going to start the testing activity. When all the test scenarios and test cases are ready for the testing, then it's an entry criteria for us to test the application. What is meant by exit criteria? Exit criteria. When to stop the testing activity or when to end the testing activity. Instead of end, I can mention it as stop. So when to stop the testing activity? Basically, in which case, in what are all the cases we are going to stop the testing activity? When smoke testing fails. Next one, when the test scenarios and test cases are incomplete. Third one, when smoke testing passed and build is not stable. In what cases that we are going to have? The behavior of the functionality can be differed. So even though the build is not updated, today the application functionality works in one format. Whenever we test the same functionality in tomorrow, whenever we are testing the same functionality tomorrow morning, the output will be changed. That kind of stability, if it is not stable, then we cannot go ahead and we cannot test it. When major test scenarios and test cases are failed. Even this point can be correlated to smoke testing only, but what will happen here is sometimes functionality wise the application testing can be passed, the major functionalities, but when you are executing some scenarios or test cases, that might be failed. So in that case, you can consider these two as a different points, exit criteria. From that point, you can stop the testing activity and you can send out an email to the development team saying we are going to perform the exit criteria as it is not meeting with the following factors. So smoke testing is being failed and test scenarios and test cases are incomplete because this is as part of testing team. Rest of the points are related to the development team. When smoke testing fails, development team has to fix it. When test scenarios and test cases are incomplete, this has to be completed by the testing team only. So they cannot do anything. And when smoke testing is passed and build is not stable, development team has to take care. When major test scenarios and test cases are failed, this has to be taken care by the development team. Right? Understood? Any questions? Okay. Next one is suspension and resumption criteria. Suspension is almost equal to the exit criteria only. There is no much difference between suspension and exit criteria, but still it is something like where we are at the mid of the testing activity. Exit criteria is at the starting point. We can decide when smoke testing fails itself, we are going to stop the testing activity, but suspension criteria is not like that. At least few of the functionalities can be tested and then we can decide whether we can suspend the testing activity or whether we can continue the testing activity of an application. So what is mean by suspension criteria? Most of the factors are same. Okay. When to suspend the testing activity, when the application functionality is frequently failing is one of the thing. When all test cases are failed, when there is a blocker or showstopper bug in the application, in these cases we can suspend the testing activity. We can suspend the testing activity. What is meant by resumption criteria? When to resume the testing activity. When to resume the testing activity. That means based on the fixes, based on the availability of the application, we are going to resume our testing activity. So when to resume? When all critical bugs are fixed and working as per the requirement. When the test cases related steps are passed when major issues in the application are fixed and can be and user can be able to continue testing activity, then we can call it as resumption criteria, suspension criteria and resumption criteria. Understood? Any questions? Any questions? No? Are we good? Fine. So interview point of view questions. What are all the interview point of view questions that we have in software testing life cycle? First one. What are all the phases that we have in software testing life cycle? STLC. What is meant by test initialization or test initiation? Let me list down those two questions as well. What is STLC? What are the phases in STLC? What is test initialization or test initiation? What is test planning? What are the prerequisites to prepare test planning document? What is test strategy? What is test scenario? What is test case? Examples of test scenario. Examples of test cases. This is a written test for you. This is also written. Okay. Next one. What is risk and mitigation? This we need to discuss now. One of the important term that we have. Okay, let us add few more based on the concepts that we are going to discuss. So now we will discuss about risks and mitigations. What is meant by risk and what is meant by mitigation? Risks are nothing but the problems that we are going to face whenever we are performing the activity in the process level. Risks, the problems we are facing while working in a project to perform the activities. What is meant by mitigation? The solution to figure out, to solve the risks. Whatever the risks that we are going to have, if you are going to find out the solution, then that can be called as a mitigation. If you are having problems in order to implement at the process level, then that can be called as a risk. There are three types of risks basically. One is resource risk, support risk, third one is technical risk. Resource risk, support risk, technical risk. What is meant by resource risk? What is meant by resource risk?
Like time and manpower.
Manpower is correct. Time we cannot predict here. So resource is nothing but how many number of resources available in the project. Okay, how many number of resources available in the project, and how many people can be able to work on the project. Let's say I need 20 people to test this application, but I have only 10 resources. So what is going to happen? I have that resource risk, right? I have that constraint where I need to recruit few more people in order to understand the project level, right? Resource risk is something like if required number of resources are not available at the project level, then that can be called as a resource risk. And what is meant by support risk? If the support team is not available at the right time. So whenever you are testing the application, if support team is not available at the right time, then that can be called as a support risk. If proper technical trainings are not available and required softwares are not available to test the application. So there are two things here. One is proper technical trainings are not available. Second thing, required software. In order to test an application, you need some software. If that software is not available, it might be a commercial thing, it might be a budget related issue, it might be a permissions related issue, whatever it might be, you are not having that particular software in order to test the application, then that can be a technical risks. If you are having, if you have solution for these three types of risks, then that can be called as a mitigation. So for resource risk, what can be the mitigation? You need to recruit the required number of resources to test the application. That will be the mitigation. Recruitment will be the mitigation for this, or else you need to pull the resources from the other team who doesn't have any work. Support risk, you need to have proper domain expertise who can be available on time related to the project activities. So that can be the mitigation for support risk. Technical risk, so you need to have the required software and technical trainings to the team members in order to overcome this technical risk. So risks and mitigations are two different terms, so which can be interlinked by using the problems that we are going to have here. Okay, just give me a moment. So any questions in risks and mitigations? Okay, fine. So we'll go with brief note on the remaining phases of software testing lifecycle, and then we'll continue with our in detail discussion from next session. But we will discuss about brief note on test design, execution, reports, and closure. What is meant by test design here? There are two things. One is test scenario design, test case design. What is meant by test scenario?
What
Did you
to do?
Okay. What to do? And what is meant by test case?
Test cases.
How to do?
How to do.
Hmm.
What to do. Okay. Test scenario design. The document which can describe about the functionality in a single line description. In a single line description. Some organizations follow specific template to prepare the scenario which is having more details. So some organizations are going to follow some Word document or Excel document to prepare the test scenario names or to prepare the test scenario descriptions. Basically, test scenario is nothing but what to do, which can explain in a single line description. Doesn't require much more to understand, but still overall definition of test scenario explains. It's a single line description which explains what to do. That's it. But rest of the information is for the understanding purpose. It's not required to design the scenario at the Word document level or Excel document level is not required for each and every scenario. So basically we can list down whatever the scenarios that we have in the application and we can design the test cases from that scenarios. So that's an interlink between test scenario and test cases. So that's one of the main reason I have specifically mentioned some organizations follow some specific template to prepare the scenario, which is having more details. And test case design. So how to do the document which explains step by step with respect to functionality. So whatever the functionality that we are going to have, we are going to explain it in a step-by-step format, complete step-by-step format. And there are prerequisites. So there are few things which are mandatory to include in test case document. One is preconditions or prerequisites. Prerequisites, that means what are the pre-required things that we need to have in order to test this particular functionality. Suppose if you want to test inbox, what is the prerequisite for that? User should have account and user should be able to log into the application. These two are the prerequisites, right? If you want to transfer money from your net banking to other net banking, what is the prerequisite? You should have account in that respective bank, and you should have internet banking accessibility, and you should have mobile banking accessibility, and you should be able to log in into the application. There are 4 preconditions or prerequisites in order to design the test cases. So this is called preconditions or prerequisites. Without preconditions or prerequisites, there is no single test case can be designed. Make sure each and every test case will have precondition or prerequisites. Test execution. Executing all the test cases based on the functionality. Executing all the test cases based on the functionality. The document which helps to understand the past percentage, to understand the status of execution, pass and failed percentage of test execution, right? Test closure. The document which helps in finalizing the deliverable of the project. Documents which helps in finalizing the deliverable of the project. This closure document will give you the complete information whether the project can be deliverable or not. If there are more number of test cases which are failed, then obviously we cannot go for the project deliverable. We need to wait until all the critical and high priority issues are fixed. So that's one of the main reason test closure document will help us in finalizing the deliverable of the project. So these are the high level definitions of each and every activity in software testing life cycle. So we will see the live documents in tomorrow's session, and we'll plan accordingly to discuss more details of test planning, test scenario one by one. So maybe tomorrow's session will completely occupy with test planning document only. And later on, the interview standpoint of view, we will discuss. And then day after tomorrow, it will be on test scenario and test cases for next 2 days, maybe Wednesday and Thursday. And final last 4 to 5 days will be on test reports, test closure, requirement traceability matrix, user story, epic. Okay, user story, epic, control flow diagrams, how these can be created and all we will discuss. Maybe it will take another 8 to 10 sessions to complete manual testing. Okay. So then immediately the parallel activity will be your assignments. Immediately when I start working on the test cases, when we start discussion on test cases, I'll give you more and more assignments on how to design the test cases. Okay. So make sure you'll be prepared with the documentation immediately whenever we are talking about that particular concept. Jyoti, over to you. If you have anything else to talk to the team, you can. Jyoti K. Are you there?
Yes, no issues. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks, team. Have a nice day. So tomorrow at the same time, we will meet again and we'll start working on the original templates of each and every document that we have mentioned here. And if you have any queries, please log them down and we will discuss those queries in tomorrow's session. Thank you. Have a nice day.
Thank you,
Thank
sir.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.